Good day, everyone. This session is about the synergies between SAP and Power Platform. More specifically, where does it make sense to use Power Platform inside or around SAP processes to automate and digitize? We will be spending all the time in the PowerPoint presentation and handling the topic in a high level. Community events are a great opportunity to learn as speakers, but also for attendees, and this is mostly possible due to sponsors. Let's give a fat thank you to those who support and see value in such events, specifically Scotty Summit 2024. Thank you to Proximo, Cubix, Locodera, and Riada Consultancy. My name is Edith Kapsari. I have a bit more than 7 years in the Microsoft universe of business applications, and 6 of those have been spent in the Power Platform realm. I'm usually talking about governance, security, and adoption, and leading the team of Power Platform experts at Orbis SE. Orbis SE is a German-based international Microsoft and SAP partner. The agenda today starts by setting the stage on Power Platform and SAP value proposition. Then we will see challenges and opportunities of innovation in the SAP sphere. We will talk about integration scenarios, also accompanied by customer user use cases or user stories, and round it up with important aspects such as security, governance, and compliance. So, how do Power Platform and SAP stand out? When talking about Power Platform, and I do a lot of talking in that direction the last 6 years, I usually refer to working with it as coding in the fast lane. So Power Platform is this rapid cloud-based cloud platform based in Azure Cloud that gives you the opportunity to test an idea very quickly. So if you are in the startup sphere, let's say, and you have a great idea and you'd like to see how the potential end users would react to it, then you can build one of the products or you can use one of the products in the Power Platform portfolio, such as Power BI, for example, Power Apps, Power Automate, Copilots in order to build your own custom Copilot, or Power Pages in order to build your external facing websites and build the experience there and test it quickly without spending months in adding in features that might direct the development in a way that doesn't really serve to the audiences that you have in mind. So you can build an app experience and immediately grasp that end user experience. You can reason over complex data. You can take informed decisions. You can digitize agents and capture customer satisfaction and also improve it. You can process data. You can transform it. You can automate background processes, all by using the tools in Power Platform. On the other side, the experiences that you have when working with Power Platform begin from no code at all. You model your data, and with some clicks, you can generate an application as a user interface layer on top of this data, to low code by using the PowerFX open source language, which is pretty similar to what you do when you work with formulas in Excel, to code first. So if you feel a bit limited to what Power Platform gives you, you can still build your own components by using your beloved technologies, web technologies, or also backend, for example, TypeScript and React or Angular, and .NET on the other side, in order to build your own component and integrate it accordingly in the Power Platform solution. All Power Platform products are Copilot infused, putting an AI friend on your side as a maker, of course, and you can exploit this potential by learning from the Copilot, asking questions regarding formulas, asking the Copilot to summarize, for example, what the application or the solution you are building does. Do things on behalf of you, so Copilot can generate templates that you can then extend accordingly, or you can ask also questions and ask the Copilot to perform intelligent search on the background. Being a cloud platform, as we said, highly integrated in the Azure world, Power Platform serves as the tool of choice for building also enterprise solutions. And it comes with tools for Center of Excellence teams to also set up security and administer these big solutions. So to summarize, Power Platform, with it, you are fast, you are flexible, you are connected, and you are secure. On the other hand, SAP We know it. It's a global leader and highly integrated in production, in financial, in operational and logistic processes. It is excellent for data precision, for legal, for compliance processes, and it's of course the number one ERP system worldwide. So we have on one side the best, currently speaking, rapid development platform worldwide, and we also have the number one ERP system worldwide. And a lot of customers have a lot of SAP applications running somewhere. And the question that naturally arises is, where can we find successful synergies between these leading technologies? Like, where can we optimize inside or around SAP with Power Platform? And is Power Platform really what you should be going for, or are there better tools that can do the job? Before doing that, let's start with a natural why. Like, why are we speaking about this? Why are we exploring these possibilities? And where do we see opportunities, for example? Of course, a lot of opportunities arise where you see challenges. So what are the current challenges in the SAP world? There is a deadline in the SAP world, the upcoming 2027 S/4HANA migration that has put a lot of companies in motion, but on the other side has also created a skills gap because there is a high demand for S/4HANA expertise. On one side, you need the expertise in the new technologies, but you also need the ones that understand the legacy SAP systems. So you have a shortage of experts, and this is something that you are also experiencing actually in every company nowadays, but especially in the SAP world, there is a high demand for S/4HANA expertise. On the other side, SAP's broad, intricate ecosystems require specialized knowledge, making it hard to find experts proficient in specific modules or integrations. And the opportunity you might see here is that without an extensive knowledge, a deep knowledge, being a ninja developer somewhere, you can bring the Power Platform knowledge or the Power Platform experts that can collaborate with the expertise that already exists in the SAP world and try to see where can you automate and make processes faster, removing that human-prone error problematics that you might have, or the hours spent on doing manual work and automating them by using Power Platform. Again, the upcoming 2027 S/4HANA migration means that SAP experts are currently pretty busy trying to reach this goal. So do we let these people wait until they have reached their goal and then they should come up with something in order to automate their processes, or we can do something already at this moment in time? What we could do, for example, considering it also as an opportunity for Power Platform, is build short lifespan solutions. Let's say those that last 2 to 4 years, which are completely fine because they serve the purpose of accelerating processes, automating, digitizing, raising and increasing performance in order to help with the immediate innovation. So again, here there's room for Power Platform. On the other side, innovation and strategy at the SAP is also currently facing challenges because there are still businesses that are using SAP versions which are pretty old. So you would like to use some automation platforms that can also take the integration with legacy systems into account. But on the other side, also help and meet the customers, the SAP customers, where they are at. And again, this is a potential for Power Platform because, as we know, integration with not just Microsoft World, but also third-party tools on-prem, online is not a challenge for Power Platform, given the 1,400 connectors and custom connectivity capabilities it brings with it. Out of the box in SAP is great, but extensibility might be a challenge, might be time-consuming, it might be complex, and perhaps, or most of the cases, not wanted. So because you sort of shift from your standards and playing a new version of the solution or upgrading it might come with a lot of dependency problems and things that you have to take care of. That means time and costs. So sometimes it's completely fine if you consider third-party tools, such as, for example, Power Platform, to do this extensibility, which might be short or long-lived. And again, in any type of platform, when you develop, integrate, you want to make sure that everything you do is aligned with security and compliance. For example, everything which has been defined and secured in the SAP world should also be respected by any type of platform that you bring in. And in this case also, how well can Power Platform do here when we use it as the tool of choice to automate processes in the SAP world? So let's explore the idea of using Power Platform as this tool that sort of considers all these challenges and brings in opportunities in the current world of SAP. If we use Power Platform as the automation tool, we could begin the journey inside SAP. SAP, of course, has also some own tooling. As you might know already, the Fiori app tooling that is most of the times used for extensibility. There are pre-configured templates that you can directly work with. But SAP has also its own low-code platform, the so-called build apps that are they're your two, if I'm not mistaken. So they are maturing, they are improving. And if you already can use whatever you can find inside SAP to be able to perform this extensibility and automation, then you don't need to consider any type of other platforms, let it be Power Platform or something else. So if you are fast with whatever you have inside or in the SAP portfolio, just use that. You don't need to consider and begin the conversation with, for example, Power Platform. Because in these scenarios, like when you are trying to find potentials and how to automate inside SAP, but also around it, it's important that you have people in the room that understand both worlds. For example, the world of SAP, of course, on one side, but on the other side, also the world of the platform or the platforms that you are trying to bring in. Because as humans, we are made of cognitive biases that involves an over-reliance on familiar tools, like, for example, the law of the instrument, as Maslow puts it. If the only tool you have is a hammer, it is tempting to treat everything as if we were a nail. And usually in the Power Platform world, we have seen a lot. You have these enthusiasts that know everything within it and think that the answer to everything is using Power Platform. But of course, you have to make objective decisions if it makes sense to bring in Power Platform, which is a whole new platform with a lot of things that you have to consider: how to maintain it, how to secure it, how to govern it, how to adopt it, and then map it to something this huge or even bigger, like the SAP world. So you have to put the question, does it make sense? Or I can already work and I'm perfectly fine with whatever I have in the SAP world. So it's important that both teams that work here and collaborate with each other are as objective as possible and don't just see nails everywhere because they have a hammer in hand. And actually, we have to agree that Power Platform is not the solution to everything. Often it is not. So lesson number one I would like to give you as part of this presentation is that there is no need for Power Platform if SAP tooling helps fast automating inside SAP. But what if we move a bit outside, or if we move a bit, if we consider those places where you have processes such as procure to pay, order to cash, record to report, make to stock. If you use the SAP.NET connector, the solution comes also with some prepared templates, which are model-driven applications that cover the processes that I just mentioned. And you might also evaluate the opportunity of directly using those instead of building everything with the SAP tooling, because those might serve the purpose and might be something that you just need to properly configure. It comes with some flows that you need to properly configure in order to open up and configure the communication SAP and Microsoft world. And in this way, you have some nice apps that you can directly use in order to automate those processes. So perhaps consider that Power Platform might also be a help also inside SAP with some ready templates that you can directly use. So if you go one step further and you go a bit around or outside and beyond SAP, of course, you might be using a lot of Microsoft collaboration tools. You might be working with Outlook, with Microsoft Teams, with SharePoint. You might have a lot of templates laying around in Excels, and you might not be considering to change that situation. So you might still want to have your Excel templates, which help you on a day-to-day basis. So there's a lot of collaboration tools that might be coming from the Microsoft world. And in this case, of course, given the fact, as we said before, that Power Platform is a cloud platform highly integrated in the Azure world, which makes it also highly integrated with all the collaboration suite from Microsoft, you might be considering Power Platform as your tool of choice, automating processes which intend in simplifying and automating the communication between SAP and these collaboration tools. You might have people, for example, that start the day in Teams, conversing and collaborating in Microsoft Teams, but get, for example, attachments of products that need to be added in a specific database in the SAP world in Outlook. And you might automate processes that understand these attachments that come as an email in Outlook, pre-prepare them in the form of the tables, for example, or the records that have to be inserted in the SAP database. These processes usually are also sort of wrapped with an approval process that might take place in Microsoft Teams. So your people don't need to leave these tools they are working on a day-to-day basis. And after getting an approval, you have this information directly written in SAP in the right place. So if you have these use cases, Power Platform might be your tool of choice because, as we said, it is highly integrated with the collaboration tools in the Microsoft world. And of course, hyperautomation that extends SAP with robotic process automations, with AI, which we see now also one of the biggest investments of Microsoft, and workflows might also be part of your scenarios. And here again, Power Platform plays a huge role and can be the tool of choice when automating these communications. So in this way, you can get the best of both worlds by using Power Platform as a complement to core systems. On the other side, you have these huge systems and processes in the SAP world, and sometimes you might want to double check and see if you have, for example, inefficiencies somewhere or bottlenecks that might need improvement. For example, processes that take up a lot of cost and also a lot of time, and you want to have a fast way to sort of identify if you have these inefficiencies and if yes, where they are at. So you can make use also of our other tools that come as part of the Power Platform portfolio, such as the process mining or advisory inside Microsoft Power Automate, that can help to gain clear visibility into the SAP workflows by uncovering these bottlenecks, these delays, these non-compliant processes. And then you can again use other tools in the Power Platform world to also get rid of those problems that you might have identified in the first place by using process mining. What might be one of the examples that we could consider here of collaboration between process mining and SAP? Let's take, for example, purchase to pay. You can use process mining in Power Platform to analyze the entire purchase to pay process in SAP by identifying bottlenecks such as delays in purchase order approvals or invoice payments and suggest improvements for a faster processing. And the way you connect both worlds is nothing new, because here you can use Power Query. And as you see, there are some supports for some SAP databases. And then as soon as you connect, you will see known building blocks in the SAP world, and you will know to what to talk to. If the requirements you have go a bit beyond, because of course it does not everything go around Microsoft and SAP, so a bit beyond and completely outside, you have third-party tools such as Adobe or DocuSign or different social media and chat tools, and you want to integrate to those. Again, here you can make use of the capabilities of integration that come with Power Platform. And Power Platform could be your tool of choice to automate those processes too. So after having explored all these innovation potentials where it makes sense to use Power Platform as your tool of choice that spans also this migration process, but you can also use it after 2027 if you are happy with the automations that you have achieved. Let's see what are some of the integration scenarios, because as we said before, integrating with old but also new SAP systems is one of the most important things when talking about automating processes there with tools that are not SAP tools. The first option is if we consider API communication. So the systems we want to communicate to have an API definition. And the very first potential here is the usage of the SAP.NET connector. If we want to communicate with the SAP ECC, so the older on-prem ERP systems where also finance, supply chain, or human resources sort of live in the SAP world, or with the SAP S/4HANA, then we can consider using the SAP.NET connector in Power Platform. And what this connector needs actually is it will help you to call SAP Classic APIs via provided BAPIs or RFCs. The Power Platform SAP ERP connector supports this communication. It's JSON-based communication, basically, as with any other connector in combination with Power Automate if you use it there or if you use it directly into a Canvas application. The way the connector is designed is that it does not support shared user, meaning that the user that is having a call with the SAP world should be an individual identity, let's say. So this person needs also his or her own SAP user authentication. And in order to open this communication gate, you also need to install a piece of software, such as the data gateway, that sort of opens this tunnel of communication, which is encrypted and decrypted accordingly, making it also secure. And of course, when you are building these use cases, you will need the support of the SAP expertise on the other side that will pre-prepare these BAPIs and these function building blocks on the other side, so that you will have to perform exactly what you intend to. There are differences when you use this connector directly in the Canvas application, and you have much more opportunities if you use it in Power Automate or if you also create your own custom connector. It doesn't come with a trigger, it comes with the actions, and here you can also see some of those visualized, such as, for example, the call SAP functions, or if you want to run diagnostics and understand, for example, if the connectivity is performing, it communicates bidirectionally with SAP. And of course, here you have a list of actions that come with the connector, but if you want to go a bit beyond that, you can build your own custom connector. Another option, which is pretty new and it's now in preview, is by using the SAP OData connector. The SAP OData connector helps you to connect with those cloud-based SAP services such as SAP S/4HANA Cloud, the SuccessFactors or Concur Ariba products that might be part of the processes that you want to talk to and automate. In this case, the connectivity will be supported by API management or another type of middleware. And again, as you are considering to work with a connector, the communication here is also JSON-based. You will have to define your the way you want to communicate. If we use, for example, the custom connectors, then build an own connector to, again, communicate with the SAP ECC and S/4HANA, you will have to define the endpoint URL, so the service you want to communicate to, what's the method, the header and the query parameters, and also the body of your requests. Regarding the SAP OData connector, it's similar to what we saw with the SAP.NET connector. It does not provide a trigger, so you have to think about one of those yourself if it's important that you act on some changes, and it comes with a set of actions as listed also in the screenshot. But of course, it's not just the same, but in a different color. It brings a lot of improvements if compared to the SAP.NET connector. And as we said, it opens up a new, also the way of, or the potential of integrating with cloud systems in the SAP world. And if we sort of make a little comparison to what we had in the SAP.NET connector and what we have now with the SAP OData connector, in the first one, we had to do two calls. The first one to fetch the CSRF token, and only if you provide the route code, you can go on and update your data. What we get with the OData connector for Power Automate is that it will take care for such calls and such things in the background. For example, of the CSRF token, and also a tag for handling to make sure to that you don't override something by accident. So we see a lot of simplification in the usage and doing some things for you in the background in terms of communication, so that you don't have to take care of those. How does this look in action? So if you consider on using this in a use case, I have brought you a very simple use case that uses the first connector, so the SAP.NET connector, of course, to communicate with the on-prem services in the SAP world. It was implemented for a customer who is a leading solution provider in commercial, in packaging, and also in label printing. Imagine that you work in the SAP IT basis, let's say. So you have to manage users, manage their licenses, and manage the general access in the SAP world. So you need to onboard, let's say, a new user or a new team. You are assigned a ticket, and in this ticket is everything described, everything related to whatever you need to be doing for this new user. You have to first understand the content to find out who the user is, what roles, access, permissions, licensing, etc. are required. And then once you have figured this out, you sort of know what needs to be done, but you have to ask for approval from the appropriate party. And with any luck, after some hours or perhaps also days, because people are away or are on vacation or cannot directly access, for example, systems, you can get the approval, and then you can create the user in the SAP world by granting this user the access. Everything done manually. So you have to work with your tools, like on one side the ticketing system, and then asking people either via email or using chats in different conversational tools that you might be using in your company. So there's a lot of things going on, opening and closing and clicking, and of course time passes by. What if you could automate 90% of all these manual steps? Because the process is very clear. So you have to understand what's written in that ticket, how should this user be sort of, how should the access of this user be handled, who the user is, and what type of licenses do we have to assign to this user. So you need just a process that understands what's written in this ticket, and in this case you can use Power Automate and custom connector first to connect to this third-party ticketing system. In this case it was Helpline. Understand the data. You can automate the approval process by using approvals inside Teams. So if you are working on a day-to-day basis with Teams, you don't need to leave these tools that you are fond of. There you can get with a card an approval, and once the approval is given, then you make use of the SAP ERP.NET connector and the on-premise data gateway in order to communicate to SAP, to use the function blocks that help you to create a user on the SAP side. In this case, as also visualized in the screenshot, the BAPI user, logAct groups assign. You give the information, like in a parameterized form of the user that has to be created in the SAP world, and system or this process does its job for you, and it's manually created. So you save a lot of communication and manual work in between by just using different tools in Power Platform world, and of course exploiting its potentials of highly integrating with collaboration tools that you might be already using. The second integration option is, of course, the RPA based. So let's say you don't have an API to communicate with, so you have to exploit other potentials. And here's where robotic process automation or where the UI flows in Power Platform come into play. But I would like to say that this is your last resort. So you should not consider this first. So you should exploit all the other potentials first, and if you don't have any chance, then you might land here. And it's very often considered for those legacy systems that do not have, of course, an API option. What RPA is basically a bot that you can build to perform the same user interface or graphical user interface actions that you perform. For example, opening a system, performing some actions, downloading data or uploading data, or just changing data, inserting data, and switching in between screens, and then closing perhaps this one and opening another system. And all these actions are recorded. And you can build this bot that does the same manual work for you, but in an automated way. And they could be attended or unattended, meaning you have to be there when they are attended, or unattended, they just run in the background and are hosted RPAs. And the cool part of RPAs is that they don't just remain in this no API. So if at some point you need a Cloudflow, for example, to automate some processes, then you can highly integrate with those, or you can also use connectors in RPA nowadays. So if you are in the SAP world, and I have seen that or heard about that pretty often with some repetitive manual entries, for example, in SAP systems, or you have some repetitive data downloads in Excel templates that should specifically be handled in a given way, you might consider to use RPA as the bot that sort of does all these steps for you, and you don't have to do those in a manual way. It is not intended for big data sizes. It's not intended to be part of your big architecture integration scenarios, where, of course, integration is very important aspect, and it's very complex. So as we said before, it's your last resort because you don't have any other way of communicating with these legacy applications, and RPA might come to rescue. The third option can be used in those use cases where, for example, you are working with big data, where performance is a very important aspect of your solutions, where the response time is, of course, very, very important. And in this case, you might consider bringing the SAP data in the Power Platform world, such as in Dataverse, or bringing them in Azure Data Lake, depending on how big the data is. So this is a scenario that we have seen a lot, especially when we built middlewares and integration scenarios between SAP ERP systems and Microsoft Dynamics 365 CRM systems, both huge monsters, let's say, huge applications. And we had to bring the data in Microsoft Dataverse. Here you can also explore the potential of working with virtual tables, or you can combine data from different sources in Azure Data Lake. And in this case, I brought an example, which is a Canvas application that we have built for site managers who are responsible for measuring doors and garage doors in construction sites with poor connectivity and poor light. So let's assume I am a construction site manager, usually working on one of those sites for 2 to 3 months. So every day the same construction site, lightning is not up yet. So I have to use an application that takes this into account. And of course, we might not have connection. So I also need to use an application that takes this into account. I would do it previously. I would get my devices, which is mostly hardware, and also some piece of paper in order to go to the construction site, perform the measurements, write them down in the piece of paper, and then make sure that I manually write it somewhere or enter it somewhere in a database. And then some processes in the background that perform the ordering of the objects. So there is a lot of potential of optimization and automation here. So what we did, we built this application, which is a mobile-based application that works offline and of course has the capability of synchronizing data as soon as you have connection. It offers two modes, dark and light mode. And you can download your construction site when you begin work at a place where you have connection, and then you can sort of locate the specific objects or where are you working at today. For example, you might work in a specific floor and measuring objects there. And then when measuring objects there, you might also want to be able to still use the hardware devices that simplify the process. Like in this case, for example, we have construction sites that use a Bosch distance reader, and you want to be able to still use it, take pictures of the object that you have measured, and also be able to specify directly in the pictures what are the lines that you have measured and what's the measurements that you have taken. And then when entering these measurements somewhere, you also want to have an idea if you are sort of accurate or what's the shift from the value which is expected. And everything has been built in this application. In this application, we also work with Fusion teams, meaning that we also had people developing a PCF that gives you the option to sort of take a picture and sort of visualize these measurements in the picture by just touching the screen of your phone, which is a capability that does not come out of the box with Canvas applications, for example. And then once you have entered this data, it is synchronized in Microsoft Dataverse, meaning that you will have a database where the data is structured, where you can also reason over data, you can sort of archive data and also be able to build dashboards on top of those. And then from Dataverse, you will have a mechanism that brings the data to SAP in order to perform the order, because the ordering is done in the SAP world. So there's a lot of Power Platform components that we see being used here. And at the end of the day, we have automated manual and paper-based work, and we have saved about 75% in performance. And we have built something where the user experience and user interface is human-friendly. We have automated the process. We have a smooth integration, like the person does not feel anything. Am I online? Am I offline? Or when will the order be made in the SAP world? And we have, in total, an increased efficiency. So this is one of those use cases where it makes sense to bring the data in the Dataverse or in the Microsoft world and build integrations in order to then replicate it back in the SAP world. We have also had other scenarios where we have been working with Power Platform on one side, Azure IoT, IIoT, SAP manufacturing modules. And what we did there, we built a model-driven application in order to control the production of parameters of machines on a shop floor. The communication application or Dataverse and SAP was done via Azure Web App or custom connectors and Edge Unit devices. So you can also consider using Power Platform for more complex scenarios, of course, if it makes sense. And then talking about integration, as we said, a very important aspect when talking about SAP in general, it is as in anything else, like when you start designing a solution, you have to consider what's the best way to integrate there. Sometimes, as we said, an RPA might be enough. Sometimes the SAP OData connector might be also exactly what you need. But sometimes you might also need to consider everything you have. And we see often that usually when we integrate with SAP, we are perfectly fine using SAP BTP or the integration suite from SAP. We might use Microsoft Azure. Data migration scenarios as also depicted in this picture. Or we might use a combination of both. So it's very important that depending on the organizational infrastructure, on the complexity of the use case, on the data structure, on the components involved in the integration architecture, that the architecture might need a special focus and should be designed tailored to all these needs. Here's an approach that we use at Orbis. And as I said, so it highly depends where you are moving on and what you are integrating to. So you have to put a lot of questions. There's a catalog of questions that sort of, by answering those, gives you a direction. How would your integration architecture look like? So what we talked so far is about the capabilities of both worlds, Power Platform and SAP. Where does it make sense to use Power Platform and innovate in SAP, and what are the integration scenarios? So what's left is, of course, talking about security and governance, and how does Power Platform respect that? So when opening or talking to an application, let it be with an SAP backend or any other type of backend, you have to pass some security gates in Power Platform too. So we have a role-based access control in Power Platform, meaning that a lot of gates have to be checked. How is your user, for example, managed in Entra ID? And then do you have access in the workspace or in the environment where this application or this solution lives? And then do you have access to the application itself? And of course, it will be checked depending on with what you are integrating to, in this case with SAP. Does this user have access actually in the SAP world? So everything will be checked, and it's not that you just get an app shared with you and you can directly jump in and modify or work with the data. In this case, it might be SAP data. So data compliance and security is also a very important topic in the Power Platform world, and it respects the security management that you have in the SAP world, because we know how important these aspects are there. I remember to have read in an SAP slide which was regarding data governance in SAP. It was written in big: get it clean, keep it clean. And of course, clean data is also something that is considered also in the Power Platform world. Another important factor is, of course, as we talked about a bit about integration capabilities of using Power Platform, and this being one of the most important differentiators if we compare it with other alike platforms. You have a chance to classify and sort of define with which end services you want to communicate and converse in a specific solution by using the data loss prevention policies capabilities in Power Platform. In this case, you can limit data usage, you can prevent disclosure of sensitive information, for example, where it's not intended to, and you can enforce rules that affect the data sharing. For example, you can block the use of social media in combination with SAP data in the same scenario, because we don't want to risk that business SAP data lands where it's not intended to. Another communication aspect is, of course, how is the data handled in this whole process. For example, we talked about data gateway, we talked about connectors, and there we use in the Power Platform world secure protocols and encrypt data in the whole process, like in transit, and of course also at rest. Auditing, understanding who is performing which changes and being able to map these changes with the user with a named identity in Entra ID in this case. It's also possible in Power Platform. You have auditing in two places. One is in Microsoft Purview in the Microsoft Security and Compliance Center, and the other one is within Dataverse. That gives you a full overview who is performing which changings and logs the data at different levels in order to make sure that data and action transparency is provided. And another, of course, important factor, especially if you consider those mid to complex scenarios or use cases built on top of Power Platform, application lifecycle management, continuous integration, continuous deployment, versioning of the solutions, or understanding who has made which changes, and offering a smooth capability of the development teams to fix bugs or extend with new features. This is also provided in the Power Platform world. And when also bringing SAP in the metrics, you have to understand how the communication between both solution managements will be handled with handshake and with processes that have to be put into place. And of course, also the solution development lifecycle, the management and deployment of the solutions built with Power Platform for automating processes in the SAP world. To summarize my presentation, I would like to say that start considering the integration scenarios, start with a proof of concept in order to understand how does it actually fit the use cases and the processes that you want to automate. Start also coaching the SAP experts, because you might find Power Platform a pretty handy tool that they can directly incorporate on a day-to-day basis in order to automate processes that they have been doing in a manual, not wanted, for example, to use extensive capabilities in the SAP world because they don't want to sort of shift far from the standards. And then once you have gained these first experiences, you will see and you will also come up and be inspired with a lot of use cases where using Power Platform in your SAP world might make sense. With this said, thanks a lot for following this session and have fun at Scottish Summit.